in the silence of a Chechen prison, a voice persists. It comes not through shouts or speeches, but through letters, fragile sheets of paper, smuggled past guards, carrying the story of one woman, and the shadow of an entire family's rebellion. Her name is Zarema, and her words, written in the dim light of confinement, reach far beyond the cell that holds her. To understand Zarema's letters, we must understand the place that confines her. Chechnya, scarred by decades of war, rebellion, and repression, is a land where memory itself is dangerous. Villages still whisper the names of sons lost to the mountains, fighters who resisted, and families accused of treason by bloodline alone. In this world, guilt is inherited, and loyalty to the state is demanded in silence. Zarema was not a fighter. She carried no rifle, marched in no unit, but she bore a Naima family name that was enough to mark her. Her brothers, cousins, uncles, many of them labeled rebels, insurgents, enemies of the state. For this, she too was imprisoned. Her crime was not action, but ancestry. And yet, within the gray monotony of captivity, Zarema wrote letters, sometimes intercepted, sometimes lost, but sometimes finding their way out. Her handwriting became an act of resistance, her words a thread of humanity connecting her to the world beyond. In one letter, she describes the silence of the prison cell at night, broken only by footsteps of guards, the metallic clang of doors, and the faint, muffled sobs of other women. She writes of the fear of interrogation, of being asked questions whose answers could never satisfy, of being punished for truths she never held. But between the lines, there is something else, tenderness. She writes to her children, urging them to remember her not as a prisoner, but as a mother. She writes to her husband, telling him not to forget the sound of her voice. She writes to herself, reminding her spirit that walls are not eternal, that memory is stronger than chains. To those who hold her captive, Zarema is not just one woman, she is a symbol of a lineage. Her family, once ordinary, now branded rebels, has been scattered by war. Some were fighters in the mountains during the Chechen conflicts of the 1990s and 2000s. Others simply carried the stigma of blood relation. For the authorities, Zarema's family represents defiance, a living reminder that not every wound of war has healed, not every voice has been silenced. By imprisoning her, they imprison an idea. The idea that rebellion is inherited, that resistance flows in the veins, and yet, her letters dismantle this narrative. They show not a hardened militant, but a woman of flesh and grief, who longs for ordinary days, cooking meals, hearing laughter, walking through the market without fear. Through her words, we see the absurdity of a system that punishes love and memory, as if they were weapons. Chechnya has long been a land of conflict. 2 wars with Russia left towns in ruins, families displaced, entire generations scarred. The mountains became sanctuaries for insurgents, the cities fortresses for soldiers, and when the wars ended, repression remained. Surveillance, intimidation, disappearances, these became the quiet wars of peacetime. In this environment, families like Zarema's lived under constant suspicion. To be related to a rebel was to inherit his guilt. To speak of loss was to invite punishment. To remember was to risk everything. Her letters break that silence. They refuse to forget. Each word is an act of testimony, a reminder that history cannot be erased simply by locking away its witnesses. The power of Zarema's letters lies not in politics, but in humanity. She writes of the smallest details, the way sunlight filters through a crack in the cell window, the taste of bread, stale but shared, the sound of birds that sometimes fly overhead, reminding her of freedom. These fragments form a mosaic of survival. They remind us that behind every label of rebel or traitor is a human being, someone who loves, who dreams, who hopes for a tomorrow. Her words have traveled far, whispered across borders, read in exile communities, passed between hands that tremble with both grief and recognition. For those who fled Chechnya, the letters are proof that the struggle continues not on the battlefield, but in the resilience of memory. They remind the diaspora that their homeland is still captive, that stories are still being silenced, and that voices like Zarema's must be heard. Zarema may never see freedom again. Her prison walls may stand for years, but her letters, fragile, smuggled, enduring, have already escaped. They have crossed borders, entered homes, ignited conversations. They are testaments, not just of suffering, but of survival. In the end, her story is not about one woman or one family. It is about the persistence of human voice in the face of silence. It is about how, even in the darkest of cells, words can still find a way to travel, to breathe, to remind us all that the human spirit is unbreakable. This is the story of This is the story of her rebel family. And these are the letters from a Chechen prison.